a tough journey for the family, for the Becerra family, for Amy and Marcos and their beautiful daughter. That it was really her relentlessness in fighting the bureaucracy that raised awareness of this, that created pressure on USCIS, got my office involved. I think we were able to get them to reopen the case with all the work certainly that Amy had done, and got a reversal out of them. And so we're pleased. What a broken immigration system that would even think about deporting a 4-year-old who had been adopted, I think, after about 11 days.
Well, we met her at 12 days, but
12
had physical and legal custody when she was 5 months. But we took care of her every day at the orphanage.
I mean, that's just incredible. And so that quite frankly, that USCIS all along, they had an interpretation that was very bureaucratic, that was very technical, but all along, they had the ability to make a decision in, quote unquote, the best interest of the child, which is where they finally made the decision in reversing themselves. And so I can't speak enough for the Becerra family and all their hard work and all that they went through. And I'm just happy that my office was able to help.
And we're grateful that your office helped too. For us, this has never been about politics or media or whose administration, but we wanted to do the right thing and opened our hearts and our home to Angela, which was not a hard decision at all. And like the Congressman said, we cared for her since she was 12 days old, and went through and complied with all the requirements of both countries. And the denial was shocking, to say the least, but it has been more than a year-long, very, very frustrating process to walk through, wade through the bureaucracy surrounding immigration. And we couldn't cut through that red tape without the help of the media. I mean, obviously it got to that point. We'd been reaching out to UCIS for over a year, asking and sometimes begging and sometimes crying for help. And it wasn't until they had that increased pressure from our local and then eventually pretty much the local media, and then certainly the intervention of Congressman Kaufman's office. So we're in huge gratitude for that. Otherwise, I think we'd still be spinning our wheels in the bureaucracy.
Are you able to give us just a brief timeline as far as the denial and then when the approval happened?
Sure. So the system was the online system was updated on August 8th, and I got the official letter in the mail a few days later. But I had reached out on August 8th I'd called a few of my friends to say, I cannot believe this. I don't have any details, but I cannot believe it. And that's a friend of mine actually sent an email to Fox 31, and I had emailed, I think, almost everyone in this room over the last year, but until I think we had the word denial and deportation in our subject line, it didn't rise to the attention. But I've been saying that this is an important immigration story. As I've watched this last, couple years worth of media attention around immigration, I've kept saying that it's not just what people think. The system's broken for everyone. I mean, no one can believe that this would happen to 2 citizens that legally followed a process. It was unbelievable. But I think that's partly why our story didn't get a lot of attention until we had a 4-year-old could possibly be deported, which is insane. And so that a system, as Congressman said, is so broken that could happen. But I've known it's been broken for a long time. And so we, Fox 31 aired that. And before we even had the letter, we were all waiting anxiously for the letter. And I emailed that over to Representative, his team over the weekend, and by, what is today? Thursday. Yeah, so by Thursday, so we got a call on Tuesday from USCIS, just out of the blue, like, they were just contacting me, but clearly it was due to the media scrutiny, indicating that they would be reopening our case, that we wouldn't have to appeal to have it reopened, but they had chosen to reopen it due to the complexities, which is an interesting term for me, because I think our case should be simple. Due to the complexities of our case, and then I had indicated that the representative had a meeting with our field office the following day, and they said, well, we can't say anything more, but you'll get some more information by the end of the week. And then the congressman met with the field office, and they had a conference call, and that's when I was informed of the decision. I actually haven't checked the online system yet, but I'm assuming it's been updated.
And I want to say that the local office was helpful. The local USCIS office was helpful. They accommodated us in short order. We are able to go and have a teleconference with the office in Kansas City that made and with the people that made the decision. And what they did is walk me through how they made their original decision, and then let me know at the end of that they were reversing themselves on it, quote unquote, in the best interest of the child, which is in current law.
Can you talk about the process to access information before media and Congressman jumped on, and like what that looked and felt like? And then Congressman, if you could sort of talk about the similar process once you got involved. Did you have any difficulty accessing information about the case?
It is ridiculous. It was terrible. So before we even entered into the process, or kind of simultaneously when we were petitioning the courts for custody of Angela and just initiate that process on the Peruvian side, I reached out to State Department as well as USCIS just to make sure we knew what we were doing. So first of all, anybody can go do a quick check. There's a lot of discrepancies between what the State Department says on their website and what USCIS says on their website. And then if you point that out to them, they say we're two separate agencies. But there's still two agencies under the federal government issuing what appears to be official communication. So that was in itself a challenge to navigate the two, to kind of walk those two lines. And then with USCIS, there is very little ability to actually talk to a human being that has any real knowledge. They do have a 1-800 customer service line that you can call, and you can get a person on the line, but then they will read to you directly what's off the website that's contradicting each other. So then if you ask a question, well, but this contradicts this, then they have no ability to critically think about that. They are only given scripts to read from, and they cannot give you any more information. If you ask to escalate it, they say there is no point of escalation. So then you can write to the individual field offices. You can write to the individual field offices and you can state your case, but they will send you back a form letter that says, thank you for submitting your information. While we realize your case is serious, it does not rise to the level of getting attention. And it was the same form letter that I would get each time. And I requested in-person meetings at the field office. So her case, I first had to send it to Phoenix. That's like the central receiving, I guess, the lockbox. It was then transferred to the Nebraska field office. I sent letters there. Then it was transferred to the National Benefits Center, and that's where it's been most of the last year. And I've not been able to talk to anybody. And in fact, I've requested many times. Oh, I also went through the Office of an Ombudsman for USCIS. They told me there probably wasn't much I could do. I've been working with Senator Gardner's office. They were not able to make much headway. So this has just been one hurdle after the other, one blocked door after the other. And so when USCIS called me on Tuesday, I think they were expecting me just to say, well, thank you very much. And I said, well, can I ask you a question? And then I got very emotional and I said, why did it have to get to this point? Why did it have to get to, and the gentleman just responded, well, did you call our 1-800 number?
Oh, no.
I wanted to die. So, I mean, even at that juncture, That was the response, but clearly they had another response. So.
Questions for both of you. You talked about this being a broken system, as did you. What would you like to see done in situations like this to fix that? I mean, you can't fix the whole darn thing overnight. And then the same question for you.
Well, first of all, let me just say that this office, this district office, congressional district office, sits in a very diverse district with large immigrant communities. So we certainly have experience in working on immigration cases. We want the individuals to go through the process first, but when they hit walls, we intervene and cut that red tape and go straight to the source, as we were able to in this time. I understand that why the law is pretty tough in this area, that they're concerned about, babies being taken illegitimately in foreign countries and taken to the United States. However, I mean, it has to go beyond bureaucratic rules and walls, and there has to be a human component to this in saying, because all along they had the ability, had they looked, had they checked what was in the best interest of the child, and it was a very bureaucratic, technical decision that was really, they erred against the family. I mean, going through the decision-making process here. And so I think it's very sad that the family had to go through this incredibly difficult process. And so we were lucky that we found out about it through the media, contacted the family, contacted USCIS, and begin to move the process forward. And but how impersonal this process was in having that teleconference with the decision makers in what we call the Benefits Center in Kansas City, and how they made the decision was pretty incredible. And it, I'll be frank with you, I think they just reversed themselves due to pressure. And I think had the pressure never been there, they would have never reversed themselves. And I don't think this family could have ever penetrated that bureaucracy. As hard as they tried, they could not cut through it.
I totally agree. I don't think we would have been able to, and I think she'd still have a denial status, and I don't even know if it would have made it through the appeal, because it's interesting because in our process to get to the denial, the only back and forth we had was a request for evidence. So it was clear where their sticking point was, and it was inconceivable to me because we had official court documents. We weren't a couple that met a baby and sat down at a diner and signed a napkin with the mom and had it notarized by our attorney. We went through a more than 2.5-year process with the Peruvian family court system with monthly visits. We were fingerprinted monthly. We had to sign off with our judge monthly, our social worker monthly. Annually, we had to have psychiatric exams, physical exams, tuberculosis tests, I mean, everything that you would have to do, and yet their sticking point was whether they never disputed that the adoption wasn't legal. That was not on their list. They disputed when our custody took place. And I have a court order that says, I hereby order the custody to Marco and Amy to take the care and protection physically and psychologically, emotionally, everything for this child. And so how they can argue around semantics over when we started caring for this child, when we have an adoption that they do not refute, to this point have never refuted. We are the only parents on record on her birth certificate that's not even listed as adopted parents. We are the only record, which I don't know how many of you are aware, but that's really important in Latin America to establish your genealogy. So she carries my maiden name. Her name is Angela Rose Becerra Haight. She carries that genealogy because in Peru, that's considered a human right, a right to your identity and a right to your genealogy, and they recognize it as a government. So it's just inconceivable, and they never would talk to us. So it's only through paper, and I think that that's the piece that I kept saying. If I could just talk to somebody, if you could tell me what it is that's your sticking point here, because I have a document that says it right out, that somewhere it's getting hung up for you, and they still stand by that sticking point, but have yet to provide what it would have to take to make it, what would rise to their occasion, and how offensive to the family court system in Peru, that were extremely ethical, extremely cognizant of what was the best interest for Angela, offered many opportunities create an environment where we really had to show that we were the best fit as parents for them, and the news has gotten to them, and it's been extremely offensive to them that it would be put in the light that they had not done something appropriate or accurate or honest or ethical. And we love that they did that.
And just to say, they also delayed the meeting with me a couple of days to get
Yes.
documents from Lima, Peru, to Washington.
So they hadn't had it, they hadn't efforted those documents before?
Well, what were the documents that?
So they had everything that we had submitted. What they requested was the additional consular communications, because we had been working with the consulate in Peru. So the consulate in Peru has both USCIS as well as citizen services on its embassy campus. We've had multiple meetings on both sides of the campus. So they were requesting, I'm assuming to vet what we were saying was true, but everyone knows us down there at the embassy. They've actually been on the news, the local Lima news.
So Congressman, is what was broken, has it been fixed?
Well, we're certainly going to go through the process and go through the law. I'm going to take a hard look at that. But I just think that it feels like they went out of their way to draw a conclusion against the family. And where I think that they had, even though there were some questions maybe that were raised, I mean, the logic in terms of the best interest of the child, and not even willing to meet with the family at any point. I mean, so is a law broken? Clearly the process is broken to arrive at the decision they arrived at, to deport a 4-year-old, really? I mean, so yeah, we've got to sit back and we've got to review this entire system and figure out, how do we fix this? How do we keep this from happening to another family again? Yes.
So I have a question for both of you. First, we can start with the family. When we spoke on Friday, there was some kind of confusion about which form you should have submitted, and that there was a lack of evidence from, the USCIS was telling you. What is exactly what happened? I mean, because from that point where they were telling you, this is not the form, you have to submit another form, to now saying, we're gonna revert the case and it's gonna be.
So USCIS had not indicated that we hadn't filled out a form. It just wasn't clear based on their denial what the next, because the evidence we submitted satisfied the instructions of the form. So then the question is there another form that we should have filled out? That's been, I think, confirmed now, that it would still be the I-130.
And
But that's part of what's confusing.
yeah.
That is confusing, is which form, and then if you have multiple forms and they require the exact same evidence, why would you have to have one form? I mean, that's part of the confusion.
And then Congressman Kaufman, the communications director told our station that you would be willing to help other families who might be in the same situation as the Becerras. Who exactly would you be willing to help, and how would you plan to do
Well,
this?
so, we'll work with other congressional offices and we do that now, when a problem arises with a family but they don't reside in our congressional district. Clearly, our congressional district is Highlands Ranch, Littleton, Centennial, Greenwood Village, Foxville, all of Aurora, Brighton, and the northern half of Thornton. And so, obviously, we are focused on our district in terms of helping families in our district. But and from a policy standpoint, we'll represent all families in Washington, D.C. and try and correct these problems. But when somebody, by the rules of the USCIS in terms of representing a family before them, they have to reside in your district. But we'll certainly work with other offices that may not be as knowledgeable as we are on immigration issues.
Marco, I'd like to ask a quick question of you, if I may.
Okay.
What's it been like for your family?
Well, first of all, I'm feeling very grateful for all this happening.
Excuse me.
And
Go ahead.
when for sure I'm agree about all these things, immigration forms and all this happening is broken. Because when I went to make a complaint there, when I make a calls, I waiting for hours and hours and nobody answered to me. I went to Centennial Immigration Office and they say, oh, you have to make an appointment or you have to, they don't wanna help me at all. Why we go at that point? Why right now they try to communicate us? When that was very easy before, that was very easy when I just go that door and knock their door and nobody help us. Well, nobody help us. So now I'm feeling really grateful. It's another big door is open for my family. I'm feeling no more stress. The last 5 days I just sleep.
None of us,
Yeah. that
including
was-
Angela.
I don't know what is the situation, but now I'm feeling really great.
Amy, I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. I have
Yes.
a quick question for you, Amy. I want to see if you can talk a little bit about your daughter and, you know, why you two wanted to adopt her, why she's such a special girl.
Do we really have to say what that?
I know,
So
right?
cute, right?
It's obvious, but
I mean, there were so many things that aligned for us in the moment. We actually weren't in Peru with that intention. That wasn't why we went to Peru. But we were in the right place at the right time and had the right resources to be able to, when asked if we were willing to take Angela, who was a very tiny baby with some special needs initially, that we could meet better in a home environment. We, of course, were elated.
And can you describe a little bit about what type of girl she is, what she likes to do, what her character is like?
What do you like to do? She really likes to be behind the camera. Angela's actually, I think this has been really overwhelming for her, and she understands a lot more than people think. And because she's actually a really, so we moved into our home this year, so we're new to the neighborhood. And we have a very quiet family that lives next door to us. They're empty nesters, semi-retired, and they're so quiet. And my mom made a comment of, "You're just so quiet," and said, "Yes," and Angela is not. She's usually full of life, and she loves to tell us what to do and how to do it, and especially loves to order her dog Murphy around. She sings all the time. Her life is a musical. One of her favorite shows is The Wizard of Oz, and she can't wait to be the Wicked Witch of the East for Halloween. And she wants, yeah. And she's just she's a great girl. She's kind, and she. Yeah.
Is she in school?
So she starts preschool this month.
How
Wow.
old?
She's been in day camp all summer. She's
How old
4.
are you?
How old are you? Can you tell them how old you are? 4. Can you say it loud?
So she's thriving in Colorado.
To be honest, really, even more so than you can imagine. So part of, she was born very small, and so her lungs had some issues, and so her whole life she has struggled with respiratory infections and has gotten really sick, but she's been not sick one time since she's been in
Wow.
Colorado, and we've all been surprised by that. So the climate.
For you to get information on this case, was it similar to their experience?
No. Tomer is really our expert on our staff. So we have a good relationship with USCIS locally here, the office in Centennial. And so we routinely work with that office. We have a legislative liaison in that office. And we are pretty familiar with the U.S. immigration law as a result of training and the volume of cases that we receive here. And so we absolutely had no problem in reaching out to them and getting them to move on this case.
And the state has had some trouble coming up with an immigration fix over the last year. And, you sort of talked about having policy that has humanity in it. Do you see that humanity in any of the proposals that have come up in the last 6 months or a year? And do you see,
Well, I think that the central, yes, there's a lot of proposals that have strong bipartisan support. I think I'm in a bipartisan working group that's trying to reform the Congress, because right now, I think there's too much power in too few hands, with too little getting done for the American people. And I think immigration issues are really, we have support on a bipartisan basis to pass it. And so I'm hoping to push a reform measure on a bipartisan basis that will change the rules of the House, that will allow these immigration bills to get done.
that's a single proposal?
I think it's probably a good subject for another, but yeah, there's a group called Problem Solvers, a group of Republicans and Democrats who come together trying to raise the partisan divide in Washington DC. We've already agreed on some reforms. We're meeting in September to count noses as to who will stand up to leadership in their respective parties to get this to happen.
Congressman, one last question on my side. We hear heartbreaking cases on immigration almost every week. Why did you decide to step in specifically with that?
Well, I step into all cases that are brought to my attention that certainly have merit. This is an unusual case. I've not had a case like where the U.S. government's trying to deport a 4-year-old. That hadn't happened to me before. I hope never to see it again. It could happen. But it is the symptom of a broken immigration system. But we have lots of cases all the time that come before us. I feel generally that there are people that are just trying to get an answer, or they feel like they have a legal right to a specific answer that they're not getting, them blocked in the bureaucracy. And so it's our job to cut through that bureaucracy, represent their interests, and try and get the job done.
So Congressman, it sounds like you guys, Amy as well, have talked a lot about the procedure. Is part of this cultural with what we have going on with immigration in America these days, and other countries as well?
I don't know. I think that in this particular case, I think that it was made by career bureaucrats that have been there for a very long time, that, quite frankly, are good at,
Bureaucracy.
good at figuring out how things are not gonna get done,
Mm-hmm.
and they managed to do that in this particular case.
Well, and I think that's an important point that I've learned in this process that I didn't know, that USCIS is not under the federal budget, but they are funded by the fees. So there's not a huge incentive for them to get it done the first time, because for me to file an appeal, I have to pay another fee, or if it was the wrong form, I have to pay another fee. I think if anybody's even tried to get tourist visas for their families, they know how many times you have to put in that application to get approved on a tourist visa, because it's $200 every time you do it. So what's the incentive to make that happen the first time right?
How much did you spend over the course of all this time on fees?
On fees, I'd have to go back and look at each form. But in total, we've spent a lot in terms of, the fees themselves are roughly for immigration around the $1,000 mark. So when you put in but there could be multiple forms, so it could be a couple hundred and then 800. I didn't have to look up the fees, but where we've spent a lot of our money was the delays in getting done and having to fly back and forth to Peru. That's where our expenses really added up. Not necessarily the fees, but just because of trying to get through the bureaucracy and trying to, it incurred a lot of, we had to maintain 2 households for 13 months. And I, had to make multiple trips so that I could see my daughter.
I think more than 10 grand?
Oh, in the last year, way more than 10 grand in the last year. No, yeah, way more. I would say closer to 30.
Closer, I'm sorry, will you say that last part again?
I would say closer to 30 over the last year to maintain 2 households and the travel that I've had to do, yeah.
And then one more question from back here. What's the, what's the future looking like? What's the next steps?
So immediately following this, we'll finish up some paperwork, and I believe so right now, the reversal's been, so she has residency is my understanding. But now we'll start the process that, in the interim, to get her citizenship, we'll file some forms so that she is able to travel. And one of them is an authorization to work, which is, but it's important for us to be able to include her on our taxes, and hopefully include her on our health insurance, because it gives us that number.
If nobody else has a question, I would like to ask a question in Spanish.
Okay, bueno.
¿Sí? ¿Creen que hubo algún tipo de prejuicio por el apellido de Ángela?
Bueno, Marco, ¿te puedes-
Marco, sí.
Sí, sí, yo pienso que ni siquiera lo abrieron mi file, solo vieron el apellido y lo pasaron, porque si lo hubieran abierto no tenían por qué pedir verificación de 2 años. Teníamos todo ahí, fotos, registros, papeles, todo en detalle, pero nunca ni siquiera o fue mucha incompetencia del personal que tuvo el caso.
Lo que sabemos es con el apellido de Becerra Cotrina en muchas asunciones de nuestra familia. Esto sabemos. Aún cuando Marco dice que cuando él va a las oficinas, yo tengo muchos problemas, pero si yo llamo, yo puedo avanzar un poco más de Marco.
¿Marco se ha sentido discriminado durante este proceso?
Definitivamente, sí, un poco que no me llamaba la atención, pero eso no le debe pasar a ningún ciudadano. Las leyes no las he puesto yo, las leyes no les he puesto yo, las leyes ya están, yo ya me hice ciudadano y tengo que tener el mismo tratamiento que todos. Yo no las puse las leyes. Cada persona tiene diferente asunción, diferente pensamiento, pero las leyes ya están hechas y yo estoy cumpliendo con la ley. Yo no estoy fuera de la ley.
Finales palabras en español, ¿cómo se sienten después de esta batalla que en una semana dio 300 vueltas?
Muy bien, nos sentimos más felices para poder salir de todo esto. Una puerta grande que se ha abierto y esperemos que todo llegue a un buen puerto.
Seguro que sí, gracias.
Estoy muy feliz, pero ese caso es un síntoma de un sistema de migratorio muy roto en este país y ojalá vayamos a cambiar nuestro sistema con una reforma migratoria.
Muchísimas gracias.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck to you all. Thank you, Congressman.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Angela, can you say, and that's a wrap?
Is that right?
Can you say that? Say,